This interview is part of the James J. Blanchard Living Library of Michigan Political History.
Well, Millie, Jeffrey, we're very glad to have you here. You may remember more years ago than either of us likes to think, we were neighbors, and our kids played together at Rouge Park. So it's good to see you again and have this interview with you. Now, I want to start a little bit with your background. I think, were you born in Minnesota, or where were you born?
No, but before I tell you where I was born, Tom, I want to say how wonderful it is to be here with you. And I have such fond memories of our families working together and our children playing together, growing up together, and also our participation in those early exciting days in the Democratic Party and in the labor movement. Now to go to your question. I was born in northwestern Iowa, which is very fertile soil, black soil 3 feet deep, in a small town. And my mother and father were both pharmacists. My mother, and it turned out that she became a single mother after she had 7 children. I was the oldest of 7. She was determined that her children, her 6 daughters particularly, were going to get a college education. She knew she never could afford to send us away to school. So she studied, and I can still see her sitting on the living room floor with catalogs from various universities in the Midwest, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Indiana, Notre Dame, and St. Mary's, and she chose to move us to Minnesota. I was a sophomore in high school at that time. My brother, who was 2 years younger than I, we were together. Kenneth, my brother, was very smart. He advanced very quickly in his educational life. So we grew up, let's say, in Minneapolis, which was a wonderful city. I think she moved there in part because she had an older sister who lived there. Then we went on, to my mother's dream, to the University of Minnesota, and I worked 40 hours a week. Fortunately, I had a wonderful job because very flexible hours. I worked for a professor who was doing a major study of student self-support at the college level. And we worked on Hollerith machines, which is predecessor of our great, fantastic computer world now. And, but I was also very active in campus activities, particularly the student YWCA, which was one of the most radical organizations at the University of Minnesota at that time. My mother was a magnificent, wonderful woman who gave me so much of what I am today, or have been all during my life. And in the YWCA, I had another wonderful mentor, Lois Wilde, the secretary of the Y. And the YWCA, we did everything. We had campaigns to integrate restaurants. At that time, Chinese chop mein, chop suey was very popular, and we would go and try to, with blacks, go to integrate them. We had, quote unquote, an interracial committee. We had, in summer programs, we had some of the great thinkers, Reinhold Niebuhr, A. Philip Randolph, many pacifists, both women and men. I had nothing in a sense. We were very, very poor. And I remember we used to live on mush during some of those winters. We had fried mush, regular mush, and so on. But I was also very fortunate to have these wonderful mentors, teachers, and particularly through the YWCA, which had profound influence on my thinking, my life, my philosophy, what I should try to be.
And then your mother encouraged you in all of these activities, or is this on your own?
Oh no, my mother, it's so hard to know. My mother used to say, and I remember she had a community, what we call now a community drugstore. She worked in that drugstore very long hours. It was open 7 days a week, even on Christmas. So she was gone a lot, and I had a lot of responsibility for my younger siblings. One of one of the things I remember, we had a neighbor that I didn't like very much. My mother used to say, "Love thy neighbor as thyself." And that always puzzled me because I didn't think I was supposed to love myself. But what she explained to me was that if I didn't respect myself, I would not know how to respect others. So that became a tenet. And I think so important. We talk a lot today about self-esteem, self-assurance, and one has to learn, one has to develop so you can respect yourself. That's not easy because each of us has flaws, but basic to life is to respect others so that you can work with them, so you can accomplish things. I believe a great deal in individual initiative, but also, simply stated, in collective action.
All right. Now let's do a fast forward. How did you go from the University of Minnesota to work for the UAW and Walter Reuther in particular?
Well, very quickly. I was extraordinarily fortunate, and I was offered a fellowship at Bryn Mawr College, where I studied social economy and social research. Bryn Mawr is outside of Philadelphia. Philadelphia was a very exciting time. This city, this was 1933, 34, 35. And we, in our program, we had internships in the city. One of the things we did was a housing study for the hosiery workers. We used to go to hosiery worker meetings every Friday night. They were young and dramatic and exciting, and also meetings of the Socialist Party. And through that, that's where I met my future husband, Newman, was at a picnic of the necktie workers who were on strike. So it was a very exciting time for all of us. That led to, after I got through the 2 years at Bryn Mawr, I worked for the Pennsylvania Department of Labor, and then the Amalgamated Clothing Workers, Jake Petoskey, who was the vice president, asked me to become the best title I ever had in my life, Educational Director of the Pennsylvania Joint Board of Shirt Workers, Amalgamated Clothing Workers of America. And that was for a couple of years. We did everything. We did our education classes. We took busloads of people to lobby in Harrisburg for minimum wage and for protective legislation for women workers. We took 150 people to May Day celebrations in New York City. We worked with the bootleg miners so that education had a broad definition.
What were the bootleg miners? The
bootleg miners, this was during the Depression years still, and there was great unemployment among, huge unemployment in the mines. This was anthracite in that part of Pennsylvania. And that's one reason that the manufacturers from New York and Philadelphia had moved their shops into Pennsylvania, where there was such unemployment in the coal fields, as I've said. And there were women, wives, and daughters who were available because, of course, the garment industry is largely female. And the bootleg miners went in the side and mined coal. They established a distribution system of trucking to Philadelphia and New York City, and were really quite successful. We worked with them. I remember there was an article in the New York Times, and one of the few times I made the New York Times in my life, but I was called something like the angel of the bootleg miners. And it was, Tom Flannery was one of their leaders. Actually, I bought my first car. It belonged to a man who was in prison for bootlegging.
Well, now let's jump from there to the UAW.
Well, after that, my husband and I edited. Newman was the editor of the labor paper in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, for about a year, where we learned all about the progressive, the La Follette political machine, so to speak, and there was a Farmer Labor Federation. And then after that, I was an organizer for the Amalgamated and the textile workers.